I think it's just the system is just like rough when you have to see like 50 patients a day. They don't even know your name. They're just trying to get your core metrics, and then boom, here's a script. What do you want? Do you want some antibiotics? Do you want some steroids? What do you want? Like, maybe I'll give it to you, right? It's like a machine to churn out scripts essentially. I mean, that's essentially how if you look at incentives, right? If you design systems, you have to look at incentives, and if you're aligning incentives towards issuing scripts and churning through patients, well, that's the healthcare system that we'll be getting.
That's right. And that is what we have.
And that's what we have.
So,
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people are pissed off about it.
yeah, not only as a patient, you have to go above and beyond these days, but you also have to go above and beyond with finding the right doctor for you if you're not doing well. Or also, too, like I suggested once to a regular doctor, the same doctor that had misdiagnosed me and let me go for 2 years and not be sick. And I at one point asked him, because I learned about some components to hypothyroidism. I said, "Hey, can you test my B12?" And he literally laughed at me. He goes like the laugh of like, "That's ridiculous." Okay. Well, it turns out I had a B12 deficiency. So F you, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that really is scary. So, but his response to me was scarier. You know what I mean? The fact that he laughed
it's so
kind of,
dismissive, right? Yeah,
it's so dismissive. It wasn't like, well, why do you, and you know what I had to do? And I was on the verge of tears because I was very hypothyroid. So I was a mess in every way,
right.
emotionally, physically, mentally. And I started crying and I'm like, I have a PPO. Why don't just take the test? I'm just asking you to take this test. Please take the test. And I walked out of there crying. And then a couple of years ago, I ran into that doctor in a parking lot. I saw him and I lost it because that guy is like someone I would love to put a big out sign outside his door. Don't go see this doctor. And I know a lot of those.
Right.
But I was so patronized and laughed at. So then there's an example where the patient goes, okay, and they cower. Thankfully, I am a strong, no bullshit person. And you know what? I wasn't going to accept that. Despite being upset about it, I wasn't going to accept it. People have to also learn to stand up
Yeah.
and do that. There's a lot of doctors that probably never want to see me again because of, challenges I brought their way. But at the end of the day,
If they're good doctors, they're not afraid to iron sharpens iron, right? Like, end of the day, if you're confident about your knowledge and your data and your training, okay, if someone's smart that comes into your door, like, great, we can have a discussion, right? Like, I
right.
think it's a sign of fear of their own competence and when they're overly dismissive of like good questions, right?
Yeah, and also just like the illogicalness and the
Right.
insanity of the rationale of this doctor. So that's what goes on. And so you're patronized, you're dismissed,
Right.
and then what do you do there? If you're not strong personality like me, and even then when you're hypothyroid, you're not very strong. You're very weak in an emotional way, and so the strength you might have when you're feeling good to speak up is not there necessarily when you're hypo. So a lot of
Yeah.
patients just throw their hands up and they're like, okay. Now you're dealing with a doctor who's an asshole. I mean, she
That's
was
why no, I
really,
think that's why you should keep doing what you're doing. Let's keep getting you on platforms where you can be an example for a lot of these people. I think one thing that humans love seeing other humans as examples and role models, right? Like that's like what we
sure,
worship, and it's a little bit in celebrity culture, but also like in how
sure.
we want to carry ourselves. So I think, you're a strong example of being like, hey, let's take control of our own health here. One concept that I'd like to get your thoughts on is that there's always been sort of this dichotomy between medicine or bringing people from deficient states or sick states to normal states and enhancement, bringing people from normal states to sort of like
Hmm.
superhuman or optimal states.
Right.
Um, and I really think that's more and more of a false dichotomy where everyone's just trying to be, going that same direction. If you're on the spectrum of health and you just always want to be, getting better. So obviously we've covered a lot around sort of treating hypothyroidism and bringing you or people from the deficient thyroid state to a normal state. I'm curious, how has your experiences, your learnings informed you to take you from, your sort of normal states into sort of hyper optimal, uh, levels? I'm curious, like, how do you apply that to, optimizing yourself?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because see now we do have the science and supplements and the ability with technology to optimize, right? So like I'm 43, I look a lot younger. Someone thought I was 29 the other day. I'm not saying I do, but I'm just saying that 40 years ago, someone my age probably wouldn't let whatever with the
Right.
creams we have, the sunscreens, with the eating, with the supplements, the things that we know we get deficient in as we age that we can supplement and replace, bioidentical hormones, right? Even for thyroid or people going through menopause, et cetera. So there's really, before we were just looking at, and that's the thing too, is when I talk about blood labs with people, we are looking for what's optimal in the range, and that was a lot of my problem too. I would go to the doctor and they'd be like, oh, it's within range. And if there's not an H or an L next to it, nobody does anything.
Right.
And that's not optimal. So I was still very anemic and lots of problems because things were at the bottom of the range.
Right.
So I think, for me anyway, I want to optimize my health as much as I can. So I do try to shoot for optimal levels in certain areas like B12, vitamin D, ferritin, even DHEA, and some other components as well. Longevity, we have so much opportunity for longevity and better lives as we go down that road. So I kind of love the fact that health and biohacking and this whole topic has gotten popular because I wish it upon more people. I wish this journey upon more people that even if you are feeling good, like, let's see where I am as a baseline. What can I optimize? What can I fix? Or also, let me learn about myself. There were some things genetically that I found out about myself through testing that explained things that were very important for me to sort of know. And so there are so many elements.
Like what
in
examples? Curious to hear some examples.
Yeah. Well, one example, I have two main ones. One is that someone looked at my genetic testing and they said, oh, you have the same marker that I do, which says that you might have an issue processing high sulfur foods. And I thought, and they said, do you have a problem with eggs? And I was like, that's interesting. No, but I do have a major problem with a lot of garlic and broccoli and some other high sulfur foods. And I was like, oh, that might be the garlic thing because I really have a violent reaction to too much garlic and never did before in life, but like really do. But then I was thinking about the eggs and I thought, it's interesting. I've been eating eggs my entire life and I've never ever considered allergic to them. I've been tested for allergies. I'm not allergic to it technically. But when that person said that to me, I recalled a bunch of times where I'd eaten eggs on their own and had a gross feeling like, I just kind of wish this was like over with already. Not stomachache, not able to function during the day, but just kind of like like I just kind of want 3 hours to go by. You know what I mean? And so because of that genetic testing and that conversation, I was like, why don't I do an experiment and just like not do eggs for a few months? I mean, that red flag from the past reminded me, got the garlic thing, and here's the genetic testing. So I went like 3 or 5 months, pretty long time without any eggs. And then it came the day, and then I was like, oh, I've gone out with eggs for a while. Let me reintroduce them. And I did, and it was a disaster. I had a distended stomach like an Ethiopian, child in a refugee camp, and I had horrible like bloating it was like a total disaster. And that's what happens sometimes because your body can adjust to or try to overcome the assaults that over time you're putting into it. And then you eliminate it, you reintroduce it, you see what an effect it has. So that's one area where genetics was helpful. It was also helpful in another area where like there's a genetic component that kind of dictates, that sort of says I'm already thick-blooded as a human being. So any more thickening of the blood could lead to stroke, heart attack, or issues or things like that. And so in combination with that and some other tests, I took supplements to reduce that. And I actually noticed it with my phlebotomist, who I'd gotten familiar with because I got so much blood taken last year for my book and I was doing experiments on, my different levels of thyroid. And when my blood was thick and sticky, he had issues drawing it and had to stop at a certain point because it was clotting too fast. And then when I came back after the 3 months of the supplements and had done this based on this genetic component that Dr. Forsman found, my blood was flowing like he could tell the difference in the consistency and the flow of my blood. So that was just a component. Like I would have never thought about checking that one, genetic component. But again, these are in-depth testing. I think it was True Health Diagnostics. They do something called the Go Kit. It's a really in-depth inflammatory marker, omega marker, some genetic markers. So there were some things in there that dictated certain supplements I should consider probably being on for the remainder of my life, and also things to just look out for and to get retested. And so again, two things that most doctors wouldn't test or know were even applicable to anything were very applicable, not only in my daily life with the eggs and the eating thing, but also to the fact that I could have had a heart attack or stroke at a very early age because of this thickening of the blood.
I mean, I think that's super interesting because I think this is like obviously information that are sitting in this sort of limbo land where they're not necessarily like diseases where they're like you're
That's
clearly
right.
debilitated, but they're not easy enough where you can just like go check something online. You have to actually like do the research, get the right testing. And I think there's a lot of things in this limbo land where it's more advanced than and more inconvenient than something that you can go to CVS and get like a little birth control or birth, pregnancy test or something, but not serious enough for like an everyday person to be like, okay, I need to see a doctor for this specific thing. I'm just wondering, there just seems to be more and more value in this limbo land, and I think we should, I think this is where like the biohacking movement is really blowing up, where people are seeing a lot more value, and let's like actually surface up this information in a way that's accessible to more and more people.
Yeah, I mean, I have taken things that people would consider, oh, that's snake oil,
Right.
like, haha, and it's not a joke. It's really not a joke. There's this stuff does work. I wish upon everyone a great experience with a good functional medicine doctor, integrative physician, because it's a great experience and it's really catered to you individually. They are not testing everybody in the exact same way for
Right.
the exact same things.
So
Um,
it sounds like you've tried a ton of different things across the different years. So what has made it past your gold standard? So what is a part? What are the core components of your protocol? Is that a certain, is that a paleo diet? Is that fasting? Is that, what are your tried and true supplements? What are
mhm.
all the key things that are part of, the LREST protocol?
Well, exercise for
Okay.
starters. I love it. I'm active every day for at least an hour, sometimes two. It depends if I go on a 3 hour hike randomly on a Saturday. But for the most part, I think regular exercise is for me.
In the
Uh,
mornings,
I
afternoon, evenings?
Yeah, I work out in the morning,
Okay.
so it doesn't have to be too early. But I think, before 12, I'm kind of one of those people where I kind of want to hack off and just kind of not do much after 3 p.m. Like, so I don't want to like go and work out usually
Right.
around the times in the afternoon, but I like to kind of get it over with. And I feel like that's sort of a good thing too, just kind of get it out of the way, especially if you're resistant to it, which I'm not. So
Do you do it
exercise,
fasted or do you do it after
fasting.
breakfast?
Never eat, I rarely eat breakfast. The most I really eat in the morning is bone broth with
Okay.
maybe a spoonful of like the upgraded collagen powder from Bulletproof, or I might put a little grass-fed whey in there, or just a little butter. But bone broth would be probably the only thing. And I've just never been a breakfast morning eater. And once you get fat adapted and you go down the paleo primal way, you often don't want to eat in the morning hours.
Right.
So, not just working out, I do get great sleep. I get like 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and I don't feel right if I'm less than seven. I do feel it. And,
Cool.
I interviewed a guy in Northern California, in San Francisco, the neurogenesis diet and lifestyle. And he talks about how, like, when you don't get enough sleep and you wake up and shower, but then you feel still dirty, like you couldn't shower. And I'm like, yeah, what is that? He goes, that's because your brain didn't get the clean out that it needed throughout the
Interesting.
night. And that's what that feeling is of like, oh, I feel dirty, but I just took a shower but you get 5 hours sleep.
Right.
So good sleep, obviously really important. Obviously I
What is your
adopt a lot.
definition of paleo primal? I mean, I think a lot of people have like these sort of conflated terms of like keto and all these like buzzwords. And if you
Yeah,
actually know, like look at the clinical term of ketogenic diet, that's 70 to 90% of your macros from fat, which
are
is
fat.
which is an like impossible amount for like a normal person to consume that much fat in their diet.
You have to graduate to that level. You can't just go
Yeah.
from being okay. So, there are a lot of I want to clear it up for everybody because so many people have misconceptions about paleo primal.
Yeah.
Essentially, paleo primal, ancestral, evolutionary health are all synonymous. There's a little variances with both. Primal would say they're a little bit more lenient when it comes to like legumes or some chocolate or dairy. Paleo might be more strict. So basically, what it is a lot of people misconstrue it as eating from a list of foods that were in the Paleolithic era before agriculture came on the scene 10,000 years ago. But that's actually a really big misconception.
Okay.
It's not just eating from a food list. It's about turning your body into the vessel it was meant to be, which is a body that prefers to run on fat as its primary fuel source. Now, that we call that being a fat burner. How do you know you're a sugar burner? Anyone listening right now, I ask you this. When's the last time you went 8 to 24 hours without food and didn't have a mental breakdown, cranky, hangry moment,
Yep.
or lapse in a mental energy? Guess what? I could go days from right. I have not, it's almost 12 o'clock. I already swam 30 laps this morning, and I have not had anything but a cup of coffee. My brain's on fire. I'm not tired. I'm totally fine. Most people out there would be having a meltdown right
Yeah,
now.
that would be yeah. I'm actually doing
I
a
don't have them.
7-day
But I'm
fast.
running on ketones. I'm running on
Yeah,
ketones. I'm burning fat.
you're in ketosis. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And essentially, so now that takes about a month but what people really need to know is scientifically, our DNA, we are expected. This is how we are expect. Now, how do you know that, L? Well, because when you look at the other paradigm, bingo, there go your diabetes commercials.
Yep.
How do you think everyone got diabetes? Because they are sugar burners. Here's the other thing, high fat. Oh my God, misconception, high fat. Oh, it causes heart disease. You shouldn't eat the fat off that steak, your heart, your arteries. There is no correlation between dietary fat and heart disease whatsoever. The only issue with fat is if you are eating saturated fat or a high fat diet in the presence of a high
With
carb
a lot of
diet,
carbs, then that's problematic. Exactly. High.
and you're in
Yeah.
trouble because your
Yep.
body is busy dealing with the carbohydrates first. It's not going to burn the fat, therefore, then it's going to go and
Right.
latch itself onto places it
Right.
shouldn't. So there's so many misconceptions. Another misconception is that it's high protein. Totally not. That's
Yeah,
actually a big.
we're often very much overweight on protein. Exactly. I think it's not high protein or high. It's like low carb, medium protein. If not like yeah, most of us are taking too
Moderate
much
protein,
protein.
high fat.
Yep.
I did it. I made that mistake so many times. What people don't realize is when you eat excess high protein, it actually goes through a process called gluconeogenesis,
Turns
and it
into
becomes
sugar. Yep.
becomes glucose.
Yep.
So again, and listen, I'm a primal health coach. I'm like the fifth person in the world certified in this,
Right.
and I have still made this mistake. Like for example, I used to eat like 120 grams of protein a day. I love protein. Who doesn't like ribs and meat and all that
Right.
stuff? And it's kind of an easy go-to, and you go whatever.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that is the amount of protein for like a 6'2" guy who's buff.
Yep.
And I'm 5'2".
Yeah.
So, I really had to look at these macros and go, what am I doing? And I had to make my personal adjustments. And, now I pretty much probably eat 40 to 50 grams of protein a day,
Okay.
depending,
Right.
if I'm craving it, I'll overeat some protein. And if I do overeat protein, I kind of make sure my carbs are even a little bit less to maybe factor in for the gluconeogenesis,
Right.
of which I don't know how much is happening.
Right.
So that's what people misconstrue it. They go, oh, it's just grains, it's a way of eating. And then they go paleo primal and they go, it didn't work, I suffered. Well, then you didn't do it right.
Right.
Then you didn't understand that main component of converting to being a fat burning beast,
Right.
and that being the primary source. So what does that do? It allows a level of freedom in the world that is beyond belief, because you don't have to, it almost eradicates everybody's food addictions when done right and you get fat adapted. People, that's the main success story everyone has at Mark's Daily Apple, Primal Blueprint. All of our success stories of people who've lost 100 pounds and stuff. The biggest thing is, I'm just glad I'm not obsessed with food anymore.
Yeah.
And that was my thing too, because when you're hypothyroid, you often have adrenal issues. You're not getting energy from the thyroid and having low T3 levels, so you're craving sugar, and it's borderline eating disorder.
Right.
It really is. I would say that I kind of had an eating disorder, probably like binging.
You're
Make
chasing
guilt.
this insulin spike, right? Because you're always on glucose. You're always burning up and down, up and down, up and down. While when
Right.
you're in
And when you're
ketosis,
hypothyroid,
yeah.
it's even worse when you're hypothyroid, because you kind of don't have a way out of it because your body isn't getting energy anywhere. So it's forcing you to crave these carbs
Right.
even more. So that's really the paradigm. I find out when people call me for coaching or we're talking about the subject, they usually have one of the three main components off. Either they are still doing chronic cardio, which means exercising above 75% of their max heart rate, like every day, too hard. We're talking like major runners doing 40 miles a week. Okay. So that would be one component people are still getting wrong, is the over exercising effect. And we talk about paleo primal, like we're meant to sprint and do fast bursts of high intensity, which is actually really positive for the stress hormones like HGH and
Right.
DHEA, and we want some cortisol there. But when you're on this chronic cardio, as Mark Sisson really puts it, or we talk about in this industry, you now are, when you're above 75% of your max, you're really primarily burning glucose, and we
Right.
can only store so much. So there is that component. So you could be eating a paleo lifestyle thinking you're doing it right, but then you're still on the carb train because you're doing the over exercising.
Yep.
Or you're not factoring in the other components, like, there's the over exercising, there's not understanding switching over to being a fat burner. Do you know what I mean? And then there's just the other little dummy mistakes we make, like thinking it's too much. People get excited at first, I can eat all the fat I want. But it's like, well, yeah, but if you're sitting at a desk all day,
Right.
maybe. So what people get confused about too is they're like, just give me tell me what to eat. Just give me a plan. And the bummer, but the awesome thing about this is that actually this is an intuitive process. So at first you can take someone who's like, all right, I don't know anything about this, and you can kind of give them this is what you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But at the end of the day, something's going to change in them when they get fat adapted, and they're going to like not want that breakfast anymore. that food level is going to become too much because you become calorically efficient and require less food.
Right.
These are things you have to figure out yourself. So, like, for example,
Like listen to your
what,
body, essentially, right? I mean, basically listen.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets better, it gets easier as you go along the path to be more intuitive and go, I think I need some fat right now.
Right. Are you
I actually,
measuring like your blood ketones? Like for example, I'm wearing like a glucose monitor right now, so I can actually
oh, are you?
scan. Like currently,
That's
I'm at
awesome.
4.9 millimolar.
So you are in a ketogenic diet?
I try to eat a balanced diet, and I'll do extended fasts.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I do too. Yeah.
yeah.
And sometimes I go in between and out. Like I feel the best when I am extremely low carb. Oh, by the way, a genetic test that I got back said that I was carb sensitive. So that made sense with why I ended up having a pre-diabetic result at the end of
Right.
the hypo bouts. Um, so I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about paleo primal, but what people really need to know is this. So for example, grains grains is a big one. It's hard for people to give that up, and they're like, I can't imagine it. I am not going to do that. Or I think whole
Yeah.
grains are good for you. Some whole grains are good. And I laugh when I hear that because at the end of the day, it's not that I'm never going to eat a grain in my life. Thanksgiving happens.
Right.
I'm going to go to town on some stuffing, and maybe it's not going to be
Right.
paleo, but it really isn't food for humans. And when you look at the archaeological record, and I recommend anybody who wants to know the science behind this, go rent the movie The Perfect Human Diet by C.J. Hunt. It's on Netflix for free right now. I think it's great. But one of the things like gosh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I trying to explain to you? I feel so bad.
Perfect human diet.
Oh yeah, perfect
Yeah.
diet. Oh, the archaeological record.
Right.
So one of the things that they said, most grains trigger autoimmune issues. So people with autoimmune disorders like Hashimoto's or rheumatoid arthritis get triggered, like flamed up with grains. I have a friend who eats 3 fried olives. Her hands, she can barely,
Mm.
button her shirt. So these are really classic things that happen. They never saw rheumatoid arthritis in the archaeological record at all, meaning no species, no DNA of anyone ever had this until the
Right.
advent of agriculture 10,000 years ago. So our problems really started 10,000 years ago and then 7,000 years ago when dairy came on the scene, when we started to plant ourselves and not hunt and gather like we had been evolving for 2.5
Right.
million years. That's when all of these modern diseases came in. And the research is there. There's
Yep.
Paleo Manifesto from a Yale paleontologist. That's a great expose into that whole arena. You've got The Perfect Human Diet, The Primal Blueprint, my book, The Paleo Thyroid Solution, if you want to get specific on
Yeah.
that. But so I feel like
I mean, the proof's in the pudding in a lot
people
of
think it's a
ways.
fad. Like they go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, eat like a caveman. Like that's cute. It's like, no, actually, it's rooted in what our DNA and our genetics expect of us. So
Yeah.
when I hear a vegetarian or a vegan talk about how we are not meant to kill and eat animals, I say, that's BS. Now, you
Yeah.
can choose. Bless you. You make your choice.
Right.
I'm not, if you want to choose because you don't want to kill an animal and you feel that's weird, go ahead. I'm
Yep.
not judging the fact that, but I will say this. Just know, people, that you are going against your DNA.
Right.
So to try to tell me that it's anything rooted in how we are designed, that is a bunch of BS science-wise. But
Yeah.
if
I
you
mean,
want
that's
to,
a fact,
go
right?
ahead.
Like we were always
It's a fact.
omnivorous. Yeah.
It's a fact. It's absolutely a fact. In fact, actually, I think they mentioned it in the documentary too. But and I've spoken to C.J. Hunt, the director and writer of it,
Right.
extensively. I'm a really big fan of his. He searched forever. He did a vegan diet. He did this. He had a heart attack at like age 18. He was trying to search for the best human diet. Um, and one of the things they talk about is, you know, there's no such thing as a human being who was inherently a vegetarian or a vegan. Never in the now we know cows are and horses
Right.
are. We look at DNA and they can see that. They can tell from DNA what's a
Right.
cow, what's a horse, right? And we don't feed a horse a steak, okay? And
Right.
we don't. And what happens when we feed cows grains? That's why. This is what people don't understand. I said this to someone recently, and I want to get this across to everyone. The reason this whole like no antibiotics in the meat or oh this meat doesn't have antibiotics, so people go, well, why would anyone even give antibiotics to the animals? Because when you are feeding them their non-native diet and shoving grains down their throat, which is they are not meant to eat, they are meant and designed, their DNA is designed for grass, then they get sick.
Hmm.
Then you give them the antibiotics. When you go to pastured farms where animals are pastured and roaming the lands, eating grass like they should, just their normal native diet, they don't get sick. They actually have immune systems. So I don't want to eat a cow that's been eating, you know what I mean? I don't want to eat a sick animal that then at the end of the day was stressed to the gills because of this horrible cow feed and the way
Right.
they stress out on the way to murder. I mean, and if anyone's interested, Temple Grandin, great movie about the woman who revolutionized our cattle industry and made a very I don't know if you know about her, but she's an amazing person to research into because she
Okay.
really changed our industry. And I've been to a Temple Grandin design system, and the animals like have zero idea they're getting murdered in a minute. They have no idea. They're just like, I'm having a great time, shot in the head, done.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
versus the cows out on the feed, horrible, feedlots off
Like a factory
the fly
farming, right? I mean, they're just
factory
yeah.
farming. It looks like a nuclear wasteland. They're in mud, the antibiotic runoffs, they're sick.
Right.
And so now you can eat those animals, but just know that if you go have a steak at a restaurant and you know it's not a grass fed or pastured steak, just don't eat the fat off of the animal, put butter
Hmm.
on it instead. And the reason
Interesting.
for that is the fat holds the most toxic stuff and it throws off our omega balance.
Right.
So it's just better if you're going to order a steak out. Just and who doesn't want to put butter on steak?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Just don't eat the grizzle and the actual fat off of such a steak.
Yeah.
You could, but it that would be a little bit of a
And the
disservice.
omega balance you're talking about. So typically in a Western diet, we are heavy on omega sixes versus omega threes. That's why a lot of people talk about supplementing omega three. So that's a good
Which I
point.
do, by the way. I
Yeah.
do take fish oil.
Yeah, I
I
want to get
take
back to that before we get off in too many tangents. Like, what are your core things?
yeah, I take vitamin D. I take fish oil. I take currently take systemic enzymes. I take Vitalzyme XE,
So what are
and
those?
that
Are
one.
those
Yeah, systemic enzymes are interesting. So they, if you look them up online, it seems as though they have the same makeup as digestive enzymes,
okay?
which are meant to be taken with food so that it helps digest the food. But systemic enzymes are way more expensive, more powerful, and they are meant to bypass that system so
Hmm.
that they can digest you, meaning it kind of like goes through your blood like brush cleaners. And it cleans out excess fibrin, which is what I had,
Okay.
which could have caused like the heart attack,
Right.
and other things. Kind of does a reset, a digestive reset. They give it to Olympic athletes in Japan and
Hmm.
Germany. It's part of their regimen.
Does it kickstart
Athletes,
autophagy? I mean, I think that's one of the big benefits
it's
of fasting.
anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
Yeah, it's anti-inflammatory as well. So any kind of inflammation issues could probably be helped with this. I benefited from them tremendously. They brought my excess fibrinogen level down
Hmm.
from very dangerous to normal in just a couple of months. I also, just because I had had a high HbA1c at the time, and that's all kind of inflammatory related, so I saw the benefit of them, and even after I probably could have stopped taking them, I continued to take them in a little bit of a lower maintenance dose. So I
Okay.
do take systemic enzymes, but they're very expensive, and if someone's ill, probably definitely try maybe looking into it, but maybe not for everyone.
Right. What does your fasting protocol look like? So I guess you don't take breakfast. You'll do like a bone
Morning
broth.
time is essentially
So like a sixteen
morning is
eight.
usually
So like a 16/8. So a 16-hour fasted window, 8-hour feeding window, or do you?
see 7, 10. Yeah, probably something like that. Again, it's not really so the other part of this too is that sometimes because so you can't really adhere to conventional eating times.
Right.
I mean, you could, but that's not how the intuition goes. So like oftentimes my dinner is at 3:30 or 4:30. Like talk about like early bird, like oldies in Florida going to
Yeah.
dinner at 4 o'clock.
Wow.
But it kind of sometimes becomes that way. So occasionally it can become a little bit prohibitive when people want to go out to dinner at 6 or 7. And then
Right.
I might have to really make an adjustment there. And in that scenario, I might have a late lunch and then have some MCT oil, some coconut oil, some fat to hold me over a couple hours before the dinner.
Right.
Um, so it becomes very intuitive and you really eat when you're hungry. Um, Again, I'm usually not hungry in the morning hours, but
Yeah, people think that you're superhuman if you fast. It's like really interesting, and it's just like, well, we're just like
right?
not like this is like the one thing where like you're getting praised for not doing something, right? Like the not eating is like the absence of, which is like one of the rare things that you could like tell people to do. Like most things are like, hey,
Yeah.
do this, do this, do this. Well, not do something. Um,
And I think, with regards to our primal instincts and makeup, when we saw food, we took it. We took the opportunity.
right,
And so that can transfer over into it's there, it's in the fridge, it's around, right? Constant consumption that may be coming from this, like, I don't know when I'm going to get it
right.
again. But we have to talk to ourselves about that. But usually when you become fat adapted, you're so satiated that there's rarely any of these. First of all, it's the ultimate in blood glucose management and the ultimate in adrenals management.
Yeah.
It literally is the only human approved way to eat. Ancestral, paleo, primal, evolutionary, it doesn't really matter what you call it.
Right. Oh, low carb, high fat. I mean, just you just go direct to the actual just macros.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's actually interesting when you say like your gene expression actually does change, right?
absolutely.
Like your fat burning genes get upregulated and your glucose burning genes get downregulated. Like it actually changes how your DNA is expressed,
And
which I think
aging
is
changes then too, right?
lost.
And then
Yeah.
you're so carbs will not only accelerate the aging process, but in glycation, but also really excess protein will. So for example, let's just take a
Yeah.
bodybuilder, for example, who's just super ripped and huge. Their protein requirements are enormous. And
Right.
they can get that big, but at what cost? Just saying.
Right. Their longevity, right? Like if you look at their longevity, a lot of these guys have heart attacks when they're 50.
That's right. And also why do a lot of athletes all of a sudden have then years later are fat and obese doing commercials for like diet products? Well, because they were on that carb paradigm. Like our local university here, some kids were telling me who play volleyball that after they
Right.
do a big workout and do a training, their coach says go carb it up, and they all go over and get big bowls of banana and oatmeal and yogurt and all this stuff. And I was talking to her a little bit about it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of rough." And then it turns out their coach has type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, who, you know what I mean? He's got type 2 diabetes, and now he's promoting that all of his athletes continue on this train that will result in either certainly eating issues and
Right.
hypoglycemia with the ups and downs of this eat every 2, 3
Right.
hours. But not only that, you're training their bodies now to run on carbs. This is such an old paradigm.
Yeah,
Such an old
that's a good
paradigm.
point. I think doctors really should be paradigms of health, right? When I see like an obese doctor or like doctors that aren't really fit or coaches that aren't fit, it's like you're totally a hypocrite. If you think you're actually smart, like you have to be good at managing and coaching yourself.
Right.
Like that's like the first patient, yourself. If you can't manage yourself, how could I even listen to you for
One
advice?
caveat to that, though. There are people that are very fit, look very slim, and they are type 2 diabetics. Okay. So, what really
Right.
matters? What's the blood work say? How are those
Right.
triglycerides doing?
Yeah.
Because there,
Fair
right,
enough.
right,
Not just
because
appearance.
there are
Yep.
people out there that are not striving to be, on Shape Magazine and really
Right.
super fit and stuff. And there are people that have a little bit of extra weight. That does not mean they're unhealthy, but the skinny person could be actually near death compared to that person. So I would tend to
100%.
say, I agree with you. I want to be an example and live it. And I want to be doctored by people who also have that level of discipline to some degree. But I also just want to kind of just throw out that, so we don't get into a judgment on earth.
Yeah, appearance is not everything.
It really
100%.
isn't. And that's when I say too, it's like you could look at, and that's where you as a person have to, look at someone on the street with a great body and you go, oh, I want that. Maybe you don't. Have you seen their blood work? Maybe you don't want that body.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
or also maybe that person is like thin and slim, but they're struggling, which is what happened to me. Before I got
Right.
hypothyroidism, I was, oh my God, athlete level in every way, so fit. People come up to me and go, oh my God, you work out. How do I get this one muscle? Like I
Right.
was really that pillar of that, but I was struggling on the inside. I was dying every 2, 3 hours for food. And I thought,
Hmm.
this is what you have to do to achieve this body because I had achieved it. So I thought, well, then this is what I'm doing here. This is the body I achieved. Therefore, I guess that's how it works. And I guess everyone
Right.
else who has a good body is suffering along the way too, and no one's talking about it. Well, not true. You know what I mean? I'm suffering
Yeah.
because I was a sugar burner on a glucose train and I did not know otherwise. And nobody did it in the year 2000, really. I mean, they knew about
Yeah.
Atkins, things like that, but that was usually reserved for serious situations, right? Not general
Right.
health. It was really South Beach zone diet, eat every 2, 3 hours, keep your insulin sensitive, keep your insulin steady. It's actually the worst
Right. Which is
paradigm.
interesting. Which is like completely opposite of what we want. What we
And what
now
your body and
understand.
what our actual
Yeah.
human genetics and genes expect of us. So again, it's like back to that,
Right.
like, be a vegetarian, do whatever you want, no judgment. Like, but don't tell me that this is somehow scientifically the choice. You know what I mean? It's a choice, but don't tell me that
Yep.
it's rooted somehow in biology or science because it's absolutely not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. No, I mean, let's leave it at that. I mean, I think you're a great role model for folks that are looking to take power into of their own health into their own hands. And I think your story, your outspokenness, your brashness, not being afraid to twist someone's arms a little bit. I think that's a good example of what it takes, the kind of fortitude it takes to get what you want out of your life. So appreciate that inspiring story. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Thanks so much, Elle.